Stormborn by Black K. Cat. Chapter 24, Fourth Movement. Resolutions in Refrain. Refrain, a repeating phrase that is played at the end of each verse in the song. When Sasuke finally lets himself back into his apartment after a lengthy debriefing, feeling dusty and sweaty and tired, there's a familiar figure waiting for him. Sai is perched on his living room windowsill, one foot dangling out over the street, the other pulled up. He's wearing a smug smile, as though Danzo's defeat was entirely his doing. But for once, Sasuke can't bring himself to feel offended. After what the other man has been through at the Elder's hands, he deserves it. Get out of my apartment, is all he says, though, because he and Sai have certain patterns of behavior they will never deviate from, namely antagonism, no matter how willing they might be to risk their lives for each other. Sakura never quite gets it, but Sasuke wouldn't have it any other way. Sai just smiles at him. Fake, yes, but mostly because he knows how much it makes Sasuke mad. Friends shouldn't talk to each other like that, big mouth, he says cheerfully enough. Sasuke growls, loosening his sword in its sheath. I told you never to call me that again if you valued your tongue, he threatens, stalking toward his teammate with murder in his heart. 4 years of big mouth jokes. Surely that merits a little homicide. Ugly and beautiful like it when I call you that, though, Sai protests, entirely unfazed by the katana that comes to rest millimeters from his carotid. And my books say that nicknames show affection between close friends. When Sasuke snarls, he raises his hands. Sorry. Sakura and Ino both stole their senses of humor from preteen boys. Sasuke mutters, but appeased, he turns and starts removing his equipment. You checked on the others? Sai shifts, dropping both legs over the inside of the sill and sliding down to the floor to lean against the wall. Yes, he answers after a moment. They're still sleeping. Tsunade-sama had the Uzukage remove my seal, and I led several Anbu teams into the main route base. Arashi-sama said his sleep seal will last indefinitely, so we have plenty of time to prepare. It is odd to hear referring to Naruto as Sama. Intellectually, Sasuke knows he's the Uzukage, knows that he holds the same position as Tsunade, but it's still strange. Naruto is Naruto, except that now he's Yoko and Arashi and the Uzukage as well. Sasuke pauses in unstrapping his katana, staring down at the sheathed blade contemplatively as he thinks about that again. There were 3 points after Naruto left that Sasuke considers his lowest. Moments where he very nearly threw everything away, where he almost gave it all up. Kakashi and Sakura, Jiraiya and Konoha and his search, and walked away. The first came a week and a half after Naruto's disappearance, and 1 day after the first search party's return. They'd come back empty-handed, without so much as a rumor to point them in the right direction, and Sasuke had snapped. He'd snarled at Sakura, sworn at Kakashi, and had stalked away from the meeting with Tsunade full of undirected, seething fury. Lashing out had been pointless, hadn't left him feeling any better, but he'd done it anyway because Naruto was gone. Naruto had left, and if he wasn't in Konoha, what did that leave Sasuke to hold on to? Because Naruto was the only thing Sasuke had been able to grow attached to, that he'd allowed himself to grow attached to. Naruto was a genius, not like Itachi, blindingly brilliant and so far ahead Sasuke couldn't even see his shadow, but a genius like Sasuke, who worked hard and pulled ahead and fit within the lines of reality, even if he was still very, very good. He was a genius, was like Sasuke in more ways than one, and if he'd abandoned everything and everyone so easily, Sasuke, boiling with rage and frustration and hurt, didn't know why he couldn't do the very same. He'd gotten as far as the village walls that time, before a blonde with an armful of flowers had stopped him and just talked. To this day, Sasuke doesn't know if Ino realizes just what she averted with that conversation. The second time was a mere month later. Searches were still fruitless, but Sasuke signed up for them anyway. He scoured towns and roads and questioned travelers, mapped out every inch of forest for as far as his feet could take him, and still there was nothing. No word, no sign, not a hair anywhere. And Sasuke hated Naruto for it, for abandoning him and running away and just leaving. Leaving like everyone else who'd ever mattered to Sasuke. That time, he'd made it out of the village and almost halfway to Oto, the seal on his neck burning and sheer overwhelming rage eating at his veins from the inside out. He'd stopped himself eventually, had staggered to a halt beneath a tree and leaned back against it, just remembering, thinking, because he knew Naruto, knew that he'd never abandon anyone without a reason and an extremely good cause, and Sasuke didn't have those. He was just running away. Running to power, certainly, but not his own power. Not his own abilities, gained like Naruto's through time and dedication and work, even when everyone called him a failure and a monster and a hopeless case. Orochimaru offered him power, but it was the kind of offer Naruto never would have looked at twice. Sasuke had stayed there as night faded to dawn and simply thought about missions and training and late nights walking through Konoha side by side, and then he'd stood up, ignoring the throbbing of the seal on his neck, and headed back to his village. The third time was the worst. After the third time, he gave up his search for Itachi, his quest for revenge, and turned his back on his slain family, looking for his departed teammate instead. Sasuke doesn't fool himself thinking that they'd approve of his choice. He'd been with Jiraiya then, traveling between villages and sleeping on rocky ground beneath the stars whenever they couldn't reach a village before nightfall. Sasuke had lain on his back, fuming at the lack of anything and staring up at the stars, when suddenly it had hit him. All the time he'd been searching for news of his brother and news of Naruto simultaneously. He'd been dividing his efforts, cutting his efficiency in half, and that wasn't something a good shinobi did. At some point, there had to be a sacrifice. At some point, he had to make a choice. And he had. He'd chosen Naruto, chosen the future, and let everything else slide back into the past. It had taken weeks, many of them, to reach his decision, but he'd done it. Knowing what he does now, of Naruto, of his clan, of Itachi, Sasuke can't help but feel overwhelmingly relieved. Good, he says distractedly, because Sai is watching him, sharp and bird-like, black eyes seeing far too much. Good. Was Arashi almost finished there? There's a moment of extended silence, and then Sai's face abruptly lights up with an unholy glee he could have only learned from Ino. "Oh!" he says, in a tone of sudden enlightenment, rising to his feet with an entirely unnecessary bounce. "I understand beautiful insinuations now! You and the Uzushio are copulate! Wham!" Sasuke stalks across the room and slams his window shut, not even sparing a glance for his teammate who could, hopefully, be lying dead on the street below. Unfortunately, Sasuke's luck is never that good. Also, Sai is like a cockroach. He just won't die. Sasuke has tried before. Many times. Repeatedly. A sharp knock on the glass makes him spin back around halfway to the kitchen, and he folds his arms across his chest and glares. Sai just beams at him, politely waving the heavy volume on tactics that Sasuke had thrown at him, and calls, "Thank you, Pink Mouth! I've been meaning to ask to borrow this. You're very kind." Sasuke growls and starts back across the room, but before he could take more than a step, Sai is gone, darting up to the roof and then away. Someday, Sasuke will murder him, and it will be sweet. It's full dark when Naruto finally manages to drag himself away from meetings and councils and reports, leaving Tsunade to straighten the last few details out. Danzo is in a holding cell carefully monitored, and the Root Anbu are being moved to a special ward of the hospital where experts will attempt to break their conditioning and integrate them back into the village. Naruto offered to take some of them back to Uzushio to relieve a bit of the burden, and Tsunade has assured them that she'll consider it, though Naruto recognizes the conviction in her eyes. This is a Konoha problem, and Tsunade will treat it, will fix it, as such. Even though they're allies, Signed and sealed now, given the presence of both Kages and a need to ensure cooperation on both sides. Tsunade isn't going to share this burden. Naruto wouldn't either, were their positions reversed. Now, with night slowly creeping towards dawn, Naruto just feels worn. There's tension and anticipation and relief and triumph all twisting beneath his skin, but it's buried under a layer of exhaustion that makes his head spin. Too many emotions, too many ups and downs in the last 24 hours have left him all but reeling, and right now the extent of Naruto's desires can be encompassed by a soft bed, a warm blanket, and at least 5 uninterrupted hours. Sasuke's apartment is dark when he arrives, but that isn't a surprise. It's almost 3 in the morning and he likely went to bed long ago. There's a cold container of ramen sitting on the table by the door, but Naruto is too tired even for that, and decides to save it for the morning when he's conscious enough to enjoy it. With one wistful sigh at the thought of hot, brothy deliciousness, he kicks his sandals off and heads for the couch, fully intending to fling himself down on it and simply pass out. But there's something in the way. Naruto blinks down at Sasuke, who's propped against the arm and watching him, eyes heavy-lidded with sleep. Sasuke just huffs and rises to his feet, stretching out his arms. "Come on, Dobe," he says, as though it's nothing at all. "If you try slipping here again, you'll wake up in knots. This couch isn't exactly meant for sleeping. My bed's big enough for 2. He could get embarrassed. He could protest and stake out the couch regardless of what his spine will look like upon waking. But Naruto is tired. Too far gone into exhaustion to even think of putting up a fight or do any of the other things sharing a bed with his new boyfriend would imply. Regardless of how tempting Sasuke looks in loose pants and a tight tank top. He waves a hand in acknowledgement and Sasuke grabs it and uses it to pull him down the hall. The bed really is big enough for 2, but Naruto doesn't protest when they end up sharing the same space in the center. He closes his eyes and sleeps, and if he dreams, he doesn't remember. "Have you ever thought," Kagami asks, staring out the Uzukage's office window, what you'd be if you weren't a shinobi? Naruto looks over at him, pen forgotten in his hand. Maybe that's the difference between them, he thinks. Because Naruto has never for a minute seriously considered not being a shinobi. Not being exactly who and what he is now. But Kagami has. Kagami is a dreamer, and always has been, given to wild flights of fancy and fantasies no one else can ever rival. Naruto wonders sometimes just how much attention Kagami pays to this world, to what's here in front of him, rather than rising in his thoughts like a castle in the sky. Uchiha Kagami is a good person, loyal and steadfast and fiercely devoted, with a quicksilver smile and infectious laugh. He follows his heart rather than his head, never hides what he thinks or how he feels, and Naruto loves him all the more for it. Kagami loves Senju Azami because of it, loves the son he shouldn't have by the traditional rival of his clan, and if times were different, if Kagami were different, it could be the beginning of a new age. But Kagami is and always will be a dreamer, too focused on what could be to pay attention to what is. Naruto hardly wants to let his friend go, but he could. To change the world, he could even do it happily. And if he cared for politics, or the power that lies behind his family line, or for more than getting away from his clan and proving them wrong, Kagami could change things. Sometimes Naruto wonders if Kagami can see that as well as he can, but he never asks. "No," he says at length, offering up a shrug, "because he is a shinobi. He always has been, and he's happy with how his life is played out. Why would he need to think of such a thing, given that?" Kagami doesn't huff or roll his eyes. He's too far into his thoughts to even feel his usual irritation at his best friend's firm grounding in reality, though it normally gets at least a slight reaction. "Think about it," he prompts, his gaze sliding over the red rooftops, all but glowing in the setting sun. And don't just say a fisherman, Arashi. That joke got old years ago. Naruto rolls his eyes then, because as he remembers it, Kagami was the one who started that joke. Nevertheless, he sets his pen down and leans back in his chair, the bells on the ends of his hair ribbon tinkling softly. They're not the same ones Hiruzen stole, because he's a jerk and still hasn't returned those even years later, but a gift from Shunka. He fingers them absently as he considers the question, frowning as one option after another is assessed and then discarded. "What about you?" he asks after several minutes without coming any closer to a solution. Kagami smiles, soft and a little wistful, and answers without hesitation. Clearly he's thought of this before. A florist. Azami loves flowers. We could have a little shop together. It would be nice, peaceful. I think it would be wonderful, and maybe our son would have a knack for plants too. You'd go mad within a month, Naruto thinks, but doesn't say, because he's been Uzukage long enough to be at least mildly tactful, even around those especially precious to him. He turns the question over for another minute or two, and then shrugs. A ramen chef? He ventures. Old Lady Ine says I have a knack for it. This time Kagami does snort, and he pulls his gaze away from Uzushio outside to grin at his best friend. If we put you behind a ramen bar, Arashi, we'd have to roll you out, he says merrily, eyes full of mischief. I know all Uzumaki are obsessed with the stuff, but even taking the rest of them into account, you're a ramen-loving freak of nature! Hey! Naruto levels a threatening finger at the other man. I don't say anything about your obsession with the fans. If anyone's a freak of nature here, it's you, Uchiha. At least I don't eat my clan symbol, thanks. Naruto is a perfect ramen topping, and you're a heathen if you can't appreciate it. Just watch. Someday you're going to be reincarnated as a fish cake, and I am going to laugh so hard, Arashi. I am going to die laughing. And I won't miss you at all, jerk. Kagami laughed, and the sound of it makes Naruto grin too. Warm dark eyes settle on him, so familiar, and Kagami taps a finger against his nose and winks. Sure you won't, he says with exaggerated belief, and Naruto, caught in his lie, just chuckles. Sasuke watches Tsunade greet the Kage, clasping the younger blonde's arms and smiling at her. Temari smiles back, slightly more reserved, but just as warm, and Sasuke reminds himself to relax. Suna is an ally, and he isn't here as a guard. The reason for his presence is crouched atop the wall Sasuke is leaning against, sitting on his heels with his arms crossed loosely over his knees. Naruto is all but vibrating with excitement, and Sasuke has no idea if this is going to end well or in absolute disaster. Anything that Naruto anticipates with this much glee is to be approached warily, if at all. Do you know? He asks, just for something to say, nodding towards Temari in her ceremonial hat and robes. Naruto laughs softly, his eyes warm as he watches the two women and nods. Gaara was astonished, he says with amusement. Or, well, astonished for Gaara. For a second there, I honestly thought he might faint, especially since Temari said in her speech that one of the reasons for accepting the position was to build a place where people like Gaara could live in peace. But you've already done that, Sasuke thinks, though he stays silent. He catches Naruto glancing up at the morning sun again and rolls his eyes, elbowing the blonde in the ribs. Oi, Dobe, they'll get here. Just let the Hokage get the greetings out of the way. You seem to think I was joking about my shinobi throwing a fit if I'm not exactly on time, Naruto retorts, though he does stop shifting quite so noticeably. Haku and Gaara together are bad enough, but Fu and Kabuto get a kick out of it and are constantly egging them on. It's awful! Your life is very hard, Sasuke drawls, but his eyes are drawn back to the only other Kage to arrive so far. Terumi Mei has entered the village several hours ago with a handful of Jonin and 9 Genin teams, and though Naruto has been watching her a little more closely than he has anyone else, he hasn't otherwise reacted to her presence. Sasuke knows the story, has been told what exactly it was that happened in Uzushio and why Haku was suddenly called away, and wonders how in the world Naruto is able to stay so calm. Naruto hums in agreement, following Sasuke's gaze. It's fine, he says softly, as though he can read the thoughts Sasuke is certain his face doesn't show. If something had gone wrong in Uzushio, they would have informed me. Until I'm told otherwise, I'm going to assume the best and believe they managed to settle it diplomatically. Sasuke has seen what heights belief in Naruto can push people to, how fiercely they're willing to defend him and what he stands for, and allows himself to set the worry aside. Naruto is right. No village, especially one answering to Naruto, would leave their Kage in the dark if things went badly. Temari and Tsunade step apart, and the Hokage waves Shizune forward to escort the teams away. The Kage stays, along with her escort, and just as a clock somewhere in the village chimes 10, Tsunade looks over at Naruto and inclines her head. Naruto lets out a soft huff of air, then slides off the wall and strides into the center of the square. He comes to a halt and raises a hand, and a piece of paper flutters from it to fall to the stones before him. Like a wave breaking on the shore, power strikes with it and surges. The transportation seal unfurls around his feet like a flower opening, thick, stark black lines spreading out through a combination of chakra and willpower. They whirl out around him, 5 feet in every direction, and then settle and start to glow. Naruto bites his thumb, flicks drops of blood across the wide array, and then steps back as the light brightens to become blinding. Sasuke resists the urge to look away and shield his eyes, squinting through the brilliance until he can make out a shape, and then another, and another, and another. A whole group is making their way through from the other side of the seal, he sees as the light starts to die away. Shinobi in dove gray and sea blue, standing tall and proud, 12 genin, all under the age of 14, with them. Haku is in the lead, hair loose and visor gone to leave his face bare, and he looks nowhere but at Naruto, gaze unwavering despite the stares of those in Konoha. He stares, eyes intent, and expression politely blank, and Naruto laughs, reaching up. He takes the contacts from his eyes, tossing them carelessly aside, and then hooks a finger in the top of his mask and drags it down to hang around his neck. "Hey, Haku!" he says cheerfully, and it isn't Yoko's polite reserve or even Arashi's practiced dignity. This is Naruto, effusive and sunbright and warm, beaming at one of his first friends and smugly pleased with the state of the world. Relief spreads across Haku's face like an ice cap melting, and he smiles back, soft and overwhelmingly thankful. "Naruto," he answers into the ringing silence around them. Then he bows, quick but respectful, and adds, "Uzukage-sama, Uzushio is well in your absence. Our teams are ready to compete." Naruto grins, and he doesn't look away from his people, but Sasuke can see Mei standing with a man wearing an eye patch who's gesturing effusively and speaking in a hushed whisper. Her brows are arched, but she isn't moving. On her right, Tamari is stiff and still, face ashen under her tan, as she stares at her little brother and the 3 children all but clinging to his robes. Tsunade looks like she doesn't know whether to march over and punch Naruto or hug him. Sasuke winces. That's probably to be expected. But laughter draws his attention back to the Uzushio shinobi, and he can't help the faint smile that pulls at his lips at the sight. Naruto stands with his people, laughing and smiling, and so very, very bright, one hand on Gaara's shoulder as the redhead says something. It's good. Right. Sasuke looks at him, and Naruto glances up and catches his eye, and their gazes hold. Sasuke lets his smile spread, pushing away from the wall and heading for the group. My future, he thinks, and so many times since Naruto left, he's thought of it. Now, it isn't just a hope, but a reality. 3 times he wavered in the past, but he doesn't feel uncertain. Can't. Not when it feels like the sun is in his chest and the world has ceased to matter. He's not going to waver again.